Dave Deep Dive the Metaverse, a podcast exploring cult classics, subculture, and geek media. I'm Nick.
And I'm Dave.
And we will be your tour guides for this deep dive of Quentin Tarantino's 1992 hard-boiled indie crime thriller, Reservoir Dogs.
All right, I went with neo-noir ensemble heist drama.
Interesting. So I swapped neo-noir for hard-boiled last minute.
Oh.
And the reason why is there's no noir lighting in the whole movie. So it is classified as a neo-noir, and it's got a lot of the characteristics of it. But to me, it doesn't have the look.
It's not noir enough. I don't know. I feel like when they're in the warehouse, which is like half the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like that's very noir.
Yeah. Well, and
all of the flashbacks, because this is non-linear storytelling, all of the flashbacks are not noir.
Yeah, or very, very few. Maybe maybe the diner scene. Yeah, just it's mostly natural lighting. So I just didn't think it had the noir aesthetic.
Not enough.
Yeah. So
Okay. That's why it's neo-noir.
Yeah. That's fair. It definitely gets classified as a neo-noir. And then for as far as the heist, the actual heist isn't in the movie. So that's why I didn't.
Yeah, that's true. But it is. I mean,
it is themed all around a heist.
So I switched out. Maybe we're getting really analytical with our
genre,
intro, but that's okay. If people are listening, let us know on Twitter if this is what you want or not. But I switched out crime for heist. I had neo-noir. It started off with neo-noir crime, crime thriller, and then I was like, no, neo-noir heist drama. Yeah, it's drama. And then I thought this is like a buddy movie. This is an ensemble movie, so it had to be an ensemble heist drama.
Yeah, I think that's your best addition there. Is that ensemble? Yeah, because that's such an important part of the movie.
Yeah, like the cast on this is ridiculous. So I mean, and we'll get into that, but I feel like we both got pretty good ones. I like hard boiled. I think that's really good because this is like hella hard boiled.
It's very hard. Everything, no matter what Harvey Keitel is in, is hard boiled.
Yeah, for sure.
He's just a hard boiled dude.
I found this interesting because this was an independent film. It's considered, kind of like one of the greatest independent films of all time.
Empire Magazine, that's always kind of my North Star, calls it the greatest independent film of all time.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they made it for like $3 million. Who has $3 million for an independent film?
A movie where you just sold True Romance, the screenplay for that, and that movie does really well, and you got Harvey Keitel signed on, kind of endorsing it.
Okay, so that's where you get your $3 million.
Yeah, Harvey Keitel, and we can talk about this more when we get into the meat of it. He's very instrumental in getting this movie made.
Okay, and then I thought it was interesting because theatrically, it basically almost didn't even break even.
Yeah.
But it made all its money on the back end, on the home theater, like the DVD release. It's become a beloved cult classic.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast, and they're saying like it opened up on like something like 19 screens initially. And that's in the whole country.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So that's not even in every state.
Like, this is a passion project for sure.
Yeah, and Miramax just didn't push it for whatever reason. They just did not market it very well. They didn't put a lot of ads behind it. But then it did really well in the festivals and stuff, and so that got it a wider release.
I find that to be pretty interesting that it didn't really make money, but now it's beloved. Like I was talking with a friend or an acquaintance, and I was telling him I do a podcast about geek media, but a lot of our meat and potatoes are like cult classic movies. And he started naming off movies, and we'd done all of them, which is pretty cool. Feels good. And then I was like, I'm actually recording a Reservoir Dogs podcast tonight, and he was like, oh, I love that movie, that's awesome. So it felt good that this one was right in with all the stuff he mentioned, like Clockwork Orange and various things. So
when was the last time you watched this? Because I hadn't seen it in ages.
Yeah, I think last time I watched this was when I was roommates with Diver Dana.
Oh wow, yeah.
Like 20 some odd years.
And that's probably similar for me.
I assume she's a diver, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I hope.
If not, Diver Ted, her husband, will forward
one of
this
my
to her.
oldest friends, I hope.
But yeah, I was sort of like, there's so many things that like that I say that I kind of forgot had come from this movie. Like, I'm fucking dying here.
Yeah,
I was like, I think of that and I was like, oh yeah, that's from Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, there's a lot of little like quips that come out of this, and they're mostly from Mr. Blonde, that are just gold. Like they're just awesome.
Yeah, a lot of quotables, a lot of douchebag drama kids just quoted this movie constantly.
Yeah, and I'll go to bat for douchebag drama kids. I like those kids.
Sometimes,
I mean, in the modern day, as an adult looking at the landscape of young people, I like the drama kids.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
they're the cool ones who are open-minded cool. All right, so let's get into our news segment and roll for initiative.
Okay.
9.
I got a 19.
Woof. Jeez, I mean, you're on a streak now.
Okay, so I've got 3 items. They all come from Star Wars Celebration.
Okay, well, one of my items is Star Wars Celebration announcements, and I bullet pointed them.
Oh, that's only one of your items?
That's one of my items, but I wasn't going to go into them. I was just going to rattle it. So,
okay. So
we'll just do a hybrid here.
I took the 3 movies that got announced and kind of did that for my news segment.
Right, that's cool.
So the first up is Obaid Chinoy's movie, taking place after the rise of Skywalker and starring Daisy Ridley as Rey. It's set 15 years after the events of the rise of Skywalker, and it's about the kind of the establishment of a new Jedi Order.
Yeah. I saw it pitched as this is the new Jedi Order movie.
Yeah.
Like, because the old expanded universe used to have new Jedi Order stuff by the twins, but that's not really a thing anymore. So this will be that.
Yeah, or a version of
parallel.
that. Yeah. It's of the 3 movies, it's the one I find the least interesting, just because I wasn't really thrilled with how the Rise of Skywalker left things.
That trilogy was hot garbage. It's the worst Star Wars content.
No, I definitely wouldn't say that.
Okay,
it has
Christmas movie is worse.
It has one of my favorite Star Wars movies in the middle of it.
Which one?
The Rise of Skywalker, or not the Last Jedi.
Okay, that is pretty good. Okay, never mind. The first 2 were good. This third one was bad. You know, we haven't done Star Wars on this podcast, have we?
Mandalorian.
Okay. We should Star Wars it up at some point.
At some point, do a real Star Wars movie?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Maybe. All right. What's your first item?
So I guess I'll just go with all the TV stuff and then let you finish off the movies.
Cool.
Next season of Bad Batch. New Mandalorian season is in progress. We got another season of Young... or it's a new show. I don't know. Young Jedi Adventures. This is for kids. I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah, that looked very kiddie.
Yeah,
it
I'm not gonna
even
watch it.
Yeah.
We got Star Wars Visions Volume 2.
Did you watch that trailer?
Yeah, I did.
That looks dope.
That does look dope.
And I loved the first Star Wars Visions because it gave me the Ronin, who's like my favorite Star Wars character.
I did listen to that whole audiobook, the Ronin, and it was just so cool. We got Ahsoka coming out with and there's a trailer of it. So
that was cool. Exciting too.
We got Skeleton Crew coming, which I wanted to be amazing. That's the one with what's his name, Jude Law. Jude Law, but I thought it was going to be more like a brown coats type of a deal, or like, I don't know, but it's actually more like the Goonies.
Yeah, it's a Goonies in space.
And I'm just like, no thanks. And then we have The Acolyte, which is a pre-Skywalker saga set series.
Yeah, it's Old Republic or High Republic. I think High Republic era.
Yeah.
Which is a time period I don't know anything about, but it's kind of one of the more fantasy time periods, I think.
For sure.
And they showed footage at Celebration that hasn't made it online. I've seen some like cell phone stills. But that show is interesting because I don't know anything about that time.
Yeah,
So
it
I'm
looks
sort of
cool.
interested in that.
Yeah, I haven't been a Star Wars super fan for a while, but I am watching the season of The Mandalorian. I am a stan for Bo-Katan.
Oh yeah. Yeah, me too.
And so
She's the Mandalorian.
she is the Mandalorian.
Din is totally sidelined, and I'm okay with it.
Din is like her quiet right-hand man. Like,
Yeah.
it's good. He's good for that.
That's kind of what he's for, right?
Yeah.
Is to be the muscle or whatever.
Mhm. He's just a badass fighter, and
Yeah.
she is the Mandalorian. So yeah, I'm down. I really like this series. I still think it's awesome TV, even though a lot of people have been shitting on it because it's less of a Lone Wolf and Cub show.
There's been 2 episodes this season that I thought were very bad.
There was the one that was like totally standalone. That was God, what one was that? Where they're on the planet with like I can't even remember. Yeah, like the lady tricks the guy into going into the old scrapyard and the genetic engineer and stuff. And I was just like,
Oh, you didn't like? See, I thought
it was
that.
okay. I thought it was a cool episode, but a lot of people like talk shit about it because it had nothing to do with the Mandalorian or Grogu or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm controversial hot take. I'm sick of that puppet.
See, I'm actually down. I'm good with Grogu, but what I want him to do is take more like a side role where he's training with the Mandalorian younglings and getting armor pieces and stuff. Let the kid talk.
Yeah, I think we've dragged out him being a squee baby for too long, and I really don't like. He could get a little bigger.
Yeah. Let him grow up a little. Let him become a force using Mandalorian small person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
be cool.
Yeah, and then you can sell new different toys. How
with
about
his
that?
helmet that has ear slots on it?
It was like,
or metal ears.
Will they have places for the ears to go, or will the ears stick out of the helmet?
I bet it'll be a little bit Batman-like.
Oh, that'll be kind of cute.
Where his ears slide up into it and they're just kind of pointed.
Okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. That's actually pretty cute.
All right, so what's your next?
So my next one is, speaking of The Mandalorian, is Dave Filoni is finally going to get a direct-to-feature, which I've been asking for a long time here now.
I'm glad they finally listened to you. I'm glad you have a direct line.
That's that meta bump. And it's going to be the culmination of all the TV shows, basically. Like,
okay,
they're gonna
crossover thing.
Yeah, they'll Avengers this and bring
Luke
together.
Skywalker will have to be in it.
Luke will have to be in it because you can't.
They're bringing like Ezra Bridger, right,
from Rebels, yeah, and I'm pretty sure Thrawn is the big bad of this whole thing. And so
we'll get Mandalorians and Jedi and Ahsoka.
I bet we get more. I mean, this is just speculation and not a spoiler. I bet we get more expanded universe characters, like maybe like a Mara Jade.
That'd be cool.
And some of those people probably get brought into this story because they're a very big part of the Thrawn heir to the Empire stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, and I think Filoni's well past ready to do features.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's graduated out of TV.
Yeah. So my next thing is, it's also nerd related. It's not super big news, but I thought it was interesting. There's a Stranger Things animated show spin-off. So it's an animated show in the Stranger Things universe. And it's coming to Netflix because, of course, they do Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And this is a little quote from the one of the creators. He said, we've always dreamed of an animated Stranger Things in the vein of the Saturday morning cartoons that we grew up loving. And to see this dream realized has been absolutely thrilling.
Interesting.
So I don't know what they mean by Saturday morning cartoons. It tells me that it's not going to be like an extremely dark content. But I mean, realistically, the last couple of seasons of Stranger Things has been hella dark.
Yeah. And while we're thinking Stranger Things, hold Stranger Things in your mind when you think about the Skeleton Crew. Do you know what I mean? Like, about what it can be.
That's true.
Because you can have a show with... I find kids and horror go really well together. You know what I mean? Like, and suspense and things like that. Because you're just... or at least for me, when kids are in danger, it's extra scary to me. So like, I think Skeleton Crew
kind of a primordial instinct.
Yeah, you're like,
there.
no, not babies. You can't put
Speaking of Stranger Things, I saw sidebar. I saw an interview, Jimmy Kimmel interview with Metallica was on his show. All four of the members, because they're releasing their albums and whatnot, and he was talking to them about how Stranger Things caused Master of Puppets to go to #1 as a song, and they sold millions of copies of the album and stuff.
Yeah.
And like he asked them like what they thought about that, and I thought it was pretty interesting how these guys thought about it. They were like, James said, he thought it was great. Every single member of the band was in favor of letting Stranger Things use the song because they just want more people in the world to be exposed to heavy metal.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's such an ambassador thing. Like, they're great.
I like this new phase of Metallica. I'm very into it, and everything I've heard from the new album. I know I was hesitant on that first track, but now I'm all the way in on this new album.
Yeah, I was rocking the new song. Like I preset one of my Sirius XM stations to mandatory Metallica or whatever, and so if there's nothing on the other ones, I just click it to that. It's always a good default. And the new song, like Darkness Sun or Darkness Had a Sun, I think is the name of the song, and I was like bopping along. I was like, this is good.
Yeah,
this is just good.
And it just like it doesn't seem forced. Like, it doesn't seem like we thought we'd go back to our roots. It just seems like Metallica.
It's like Black Album-ish. And really good. Like,
it's a little thrashier than that.
Yeah, even. Maybe some of the faster Black Album songs.
Yeah.
I thought it was really solid. Anyway, that was a sidebar. What's your last piece?
My final one is the movie that I think is the most interesting of these. And this is directed by James Mangold, director of Logan and the upcoming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And it's called, I believe, what is it? The Dawn of the Force.
Yeah, Dawn of the Force.
Yeah, and it is set very early in the Star Wars timeline, earlier than we've ever gone, pre-Jedi, pre-Sith, and it's like a biblical epic.
Yeah,
about
this is the Silmarillion.
Yeah, this is how the Force was discovered and harnessed, where the Jedi come from, and all of this stuff. He said that he wanted it to be like a Bible movie, like the Ten Commandments, a Cecil B. DeMille style movie about the arrival of the Force.
Interesting.
And I like Mangold as a director. I think Logan's probably top 5 best superhero movies ever.
Definitely amazing.
And so I trust him, and I like, even though this is early in the timeline, I like getting things we've never gotten before.
Sure.
And things that don't feel constrained by the expectation of we know what's going to happen, because we know that there's going to be all of this future history in Star Wars, but we have really no idea how it started.
Yeah, there's no real information on this. Yeah, I think it's cool. It's blazing new trails. I think that Star Wars is smart to have like fun episodic shows, but then do these big movies that are kind of one-offs without being tied into a single narrative. Like, I'm kind of over the Skywalker saga. Yeah. But some of the side stuff is really interesting to me. The universe is interesting. Yeah,
totally. And like, we've talked about, it is a universe that allows for like Westerns and samurai movies and cyberpunk and any sort of mashup of all of these things.
It's kind of like riffs, really.
Yeah, because it's a huge galaxy where kind of every sort of setting exists within it.
Yeah.
And we have really kind of stuck to that Skywalker family a little too closely for how big the galaxy is.
Tatooine. Why are we always going to deserts?
It is really funny how much time has been spent on Tatooine out of, it's a planet that everyone shits on and no one likes.
It's like the worst place ever.
And it's not central to anything except for, I guess, spice smuggling, right? Because it's out of everyone's jurisdiction or whatever. But yeah, we spend way too much time on Tatooine.
Yeah, fuck that place.
Anything else?
No, that's it. How about podcast fuel? What do we got?
Our podcast fuel today is, it just says white on the can, but the listing on Untapped was White Wit by Breakside Brewery in Portland, Oregon. 5.2 ABV. It's a modern take on a classic wit beer, light and refreshing, brewed with coriander, bitter orange, and sweet tangerine, with a symphony of flavor that is built on a constrained complexity.
Yeah, it's a good wit beer.
It's a good, solid wit beer, and I was looking for beers that reference the different characters in the movie, and so we went with my favorite, Mr. White.
Oh, he's your favorite. I was going to ask you who's your favorite.
It's I think it probably changes. I think it probably was Mr. Pink, who has all the best dialogue. When I was younger, because he has all these great monologues, right?
Yeah.
But I really have, as I've gotten older, I start drifting towards identifying with older
the
characters.
Old guy?
Yeah, and so I like Mr. White quite a bit. And Tarantino, like, kind of more or less called him, like, he's who he sees as the hero of the movie.
Oh, okay. I can see that. I go between Mr. Pink and Mr. Blonde as my favorites.
Mr. Blonde is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, he's amazing.
There's no getting around it. And, like... he seemed very, like, everyone seemed very old when you watch this as a teenager, right? And now that he's actually probably younger than us.
Definitely.
And it's like, oh, wow, he's like a good looking young guy. Like, and
This is just sicko.
I didn't imagine, I didn't see him that way when I was a teen. I didn't see him like a good looking young guy.
Yeah, like he's the handsome guy on this crew.
Yeah. Oh, easily the best looking guy out of all of them.
Yeah. And so I just think that he's got really good dialogue also. Him and Mr. Pink have the best quips.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a break, and then we will come back with our piece.
All right, welcome back, divers. Let's dive into Reservoir Dogs 1992, directed by Quentin Tarantino. After the diamond heist they were hired for goes wrong, 8 wise guys with colorful pseudonyms try to put together the pieces of what went wrong and which one of them is the rat.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. This movie basically has no plot.
Yeah.
It's not that it has no plot, but the plot is extremely... it's not important. What happens isn't as important as the interactions that the people have.
Yeah, it's very much like a stage play. Like,
yes.
For the most part, it's kind of double or triple headers, just 2 or 3 people talking in a single space. The camera doesn't always move a whole lot.
Yeah.
And it just sort of seems like it would be real easy to imagine this as a stage production.
This is like the violent version of Clerks.
Yeah, I did think of Clerks, and it's kind of the same time period, and it's the same movie studio, Miramax. Miramax really, geez, I guess do we have to talk about Harvey Weinstein? Is that a thing that we have to talk about?
I mean, he's a scumbag.
He's a horrible person that released all of the best movies of the 90s.
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunate that he's attached to any of this stuff. He's not a creative person, but
no, he's just a money guy.
He's a money guy. But Miramax also did Clerks. So this is part of that wave of 90s cinema like that, like this sort of new wave, the new 90s style.
Yeah. And so we're getting into that storytelling, and that's one of my first points, and that's this feels like the 90s. It's got that vocal the vocal interplay, the banter. It's very like pitter patter. I don't know what you'd say, how you'd describe it, but it's extremely quippy and snarky, which the 90s is all about that.
Right.
It really strongly reminded me of Kevin Smith, the way that people talk. I don't know if he was influenced by them or they were influenced by him or they just came from the same scene.
I think they're very contemporary to each other, but they're obviously, they're both video store nerds, right? Like they both are guys around the same age, probably watching the same things and, going, I'm going to make movies at the same time.
Yeah, I would 100% rather hang out with Kevin Smith, though.
Than Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah. No, he's
Yeah.
a vegan. Never mind. Tarantino.
I don't know. As I listened to both of them, like I listened to Kevin Smith's podcasts, and I listened to a lot of interviews with Tarantino, and I think I could get along pretty well with either of those guys. Yeah, definitely. I think they're both very interesting guys that I have a lot of interests in common with.
One of the most interesting scenes that I think kind of exemplified this vibe was the tipping discussion with Mr. Pink. And he's talking about why he doesn't tip, and they're going back and forth, and it's really debate style. And I really, really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, I love it, and it does so much that the film opens up in that diner scene.
Yeah.
And you learn everyone's characters by their dialogue in the scene. Tarantino's Mr. Brown has his whole thing about Like a Virgin, which is actually like the very opening of it.
Yeah.
And then you get Mr. Pink's his monologue on tipping, and
I think that anti-tipping stance that Mr. Pink took, I think a lot of young douchey dudes really took that to heart.
That was literally the scene that because I can remember being at like Denny's or Sherry's and people doing that whole bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like unfortunately, because I think the writing is brilliant, a lot of douchebaggery was justified from the movie.
Yeah.
Like people were like, yeah, I'm not going to tip because I've got this cool monologue I memorized from this movie.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a cool monologue though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mr. White, he's like, he puts a stop to it at the end. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. And he gives him this whole thing about how waitressing is like the one job that any woman can do and make a living. And that's why, and he starts dropping statistics, and Mr. Pink is like, fuck all that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's good.
He's like, #fake news.
And, well, he doesn't disagree. He just like it's not his responsibility to fix that issue. That's basically the same thing. The first note I had was the Tarantino dialogue.
Yeah.
I think this is something that now when people do Tarantino kind of dialogue, it feels very cliche because it's such a thing. But you have to put yourself in the 1992 mindset. This movie opens up with him going on talking about, someone getting fucked by a big dick and how much it hurts. And it's like, you're like, what am I watching?
Yeah,
because that's not how movies talk. Like, you're not used to this.
Like it was interesting going from doing a hot take of John Wick 4 and then watching this.
Yeah.
Because I was watching some YouTube videos and reading some stuff. Because after you research a movie a bunch, your algorithms change and they think you're a super fan.
Yeah, I always get really good stuff after we recorded a podcast.
But John Wick says less than 400 words in John Wick 4. Mm-hmm. The character says almost nothing, and Keanu was responsible for cutting almost half the dialogue that was written for him, and they said that he is extremely dedicated to being silent in the movie. And so that is an amazing modern movie. I mean, it got really high ratings, and this is the polar opposite.
Yeah.
The words come a mile a minute. They fucking shellac you with words.
Yeah.
There's like as many words in this as there are bullets in John Wick.
It's funny because John Wick is a Clint Eastwood type character, right? And you have that. You actually do have that in this movie with like Michael Madsen, because he's a guy of Mr. Blonde is a man of few words. He doesn't say a lot.
Not until it's his moment.
But even like he doesn't go on long things. He just sort of is like, "You gonna bark all day, little doggy, or you gonna bite?"
Yeah,
and it's like that. that's a real tight little.
Or when
thing.
when the cop is like pleading and pleading and pleading for his life, and he just goes, "You done?"
Yeah. So like, yeah, certain characters have that Tarantino thing, and not everyone though. Like, not everyone does the dialogue. So one of the things I think is a hallmark of Tarantino storytelling is nonlinear non-linear storytelling. And
I addressed that in the themes and motifs because I had no idea where to put it.
Yeah. So I put it here. And so he makes a technical distinction. The movie doesn't have flashbacks in it because a flashback is when a character thinks
from their perspective.
Yeah, they think back and remember something. The movie is told non-linearly, so when it's appropriate, we go back and see things that happened earlier to add
so we
add
can greater
context.
Understand the current scene. Gotcha.
And that's something he's just, I always find it interesting how. So this is his very first movie that he's directing, second movie that he's written, and how Tarantino it is right from the start. Like, he does evolve as a director, but there's so many hallmarks of his style right here.
I don't know if any of the evolution was actually an improvement. I mean, he might have some better movies. Like, it'd be hard to argue about Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, but it's very, very peak Tarantino.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
think he started his Imperial phase with his first movie.
I think a lot of people would agree with that, and probably it's technically true, right? Because the Imperial phase is the stuff you're remembered for.
Yeah.
And so these first three movies that we're about to deep dive probably are that.
So what are the next two? Remind the divers.
Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown.
And Jackie Brown. So I don't think that Jackie Brown is nearly as beloved as the other two, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we watched it in the theater. I remember seeing it with you.
Yeah, we went to an advanced screening of that. That was kind of one of my first. Actually, that was definitely the first time I went to an advanced screening of something.
Yeah, we've been doing movie shit for years.
It's very true. Yeah. So, anyways, I was just sort of impressed with how Tarantino the movie was. He had his vision.
Yeah.
Right from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that's very true. So I had a few more points in storytelling. We can just kind of go back and forth on these. One thing that I thought was interesting was how 90s this feels because of the casual anti-Semitism and racism. For impact.
So that's where you put this. Yeah. So it definitely has to get talked about.
Yeah, I think that they say a lot of the things that they say in order to make the characters seem more gruff and tough and to be off-putting intentionally.
Yeah.
But it's just very casual with how they just drop slurs.
Yeah. So Tarantino, and I think I talked about this in the themes, but he really likes to make you complicit in things. So he wants to get the uncomfortable laugh out of you that makes you feel guilty. And so he uses these things in a titillating way. Like, he uses the racial slurs, and this is a feature in all of his movies. And it's uncomfortable. Like, it felt uncomfortable in the 90s, and it feels very uncomfortable now when you watch it. And you're like, Jesus, did they have to say that?
It's weird because, like, people will look back at this movie and be like, oh, it was a product of its time. And I think, no, at that time, this was still not cool. I was there.
At this time, it was still not cool.
I lived during this time.
And it kind of made it cool in a way. Like, it's another one of those things, like, it gave people permission.
Yeah, it emboldened people to say the things they shouldn't say.
Exactly. And I don't, it'll seem weird. It'll seem maybe hypocritical that I sort of will excuse a lot of the violence and justify it and then be like, but they shouldn't say the N-word. Yeah. Like, arguably it's worse to murder people. To
murder a guy, mutilate a guy.
Yeah. But I just feel like it's excessive. Like, I don't feel like it's not additive to the story. And it's just like, it's one of those things. I think bothers me.
There's a fine line, and I'm in no way defending using racism casually as a trope.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is if you're trying to paint a picture of a character and you want to give the audience the signal, this guy is a scumbag or this guy is a racist. He is not a guy who is culturally acceptable. Like, you're having him do things that are considered negative.
Right.
in order to tell the audience that they are a bad guy.
Yeah, and this movie does that a lot for sure, where it makes you like a character and then gives something bad, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then oftentimes, like, we shift gears back into them being funny and jovial again.
Yeah,
and like I do get it, like
I think it's Mr. Pink that drops the anti-Semitic comment early on. Mm-hmm. And I really like him because he's hilarious and stuff, but he said it and I just went, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't get me to laugh. I was just like, ooh.
Yeah. No, it definitely, like I said, it was like a cringe in the 90s, and now it's like a full on, like, oof.
Yeah.
Like, you feel
you
like,
just don't see that in movies anymore.
yeah, no, well, except for Tarantino movies, because he still insists on doing
So
that.
is he a racist? I don't know that much about the man.
I think there's some troubling impulses there. I don't think, I'm not going to say I don't think he's a racist person.
He's not like an active malicious racist. He's not like a tiki torch marching guy.
Exactly. I think he's
just kind of a casual douchey.
I think he delights in pushing like in sort of edgy behavior, like an Eminem, right? Like how Eminem, after all of these years and all the success, is still sort of homophobic in his music.
Yeah, he still shits on people just for fun, even though he's a millionaire. Doesn't need the publicity.
Exactly, and I think Tarantino is like still knows anytime you throw an N-bomb in there, it's gonna get an emotional reaction out of people.
Yeah, he's a button pusher.
He likes to push buttons. So is that racist? I don't know. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable with it.
It's not what I would consider clever.
No, actually, see, and that's the thing. And I'll apply that to Eminem also. Someone that brilliant should have a deeper repertoire to pull from. Mm-hmm. It's because I think so highly of this person and their talent that I'm so disappointed in them for going to that well again.
Yeah, it's like when someone says something that I don't agree with, but they say it in a way, or they discuss it and back it up with a smart opinion that I might not agree with, but I listen, and they did have reason. Example, Dave Chappelle. Mm-hmm. He says some troubling shit, but he explains himself in a very methodical, intelligent way. And so you can listen and you can be like, all right, I see why you say that.
I still don't agree. Yeah, I still don't agree with you.
But it's not the same. It's just calling out slurs.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing. All right, let's keep going in storytelling.
Right. So something I think is just a brilliant storytelling choice is we never see the heist. We go from the diner scene where they all have breakfast before the heist to the car with Mr. Orange and Mr. White, and Mr. Orange is shot and freaking out. And we do not see what happens in between, and we never see all of it. So while our ensemble cast is piecing together what happened and discussing their versions of the events and everything, the audience is also putting the pieces together themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. I actually have it in both performances and visuals. The car scene with Mr. Orange dying, I feel like that whole scene was brilliant filmmaking.
Oh, God.
The way that it's shot to where you're looking over as though you're sitting in the passenger seat. Mm-hmm. You're looking over the back seat at Mr. Orange, and then
are we transitioning to visuals?
Well, it's all one.
It's
storytelling, it's performance, it's visuals.
It's the whole
all
thing.
Three.
Yeah.
Because the Tim Roth's performance there is just amazing. It's good. And then and I love the way that it was shot, how the camera is looking like you're sitting in the passenger seat. It looks back, it looks forward, it looks back, and it's like you're in the car with them. Yeah. And you almost can like feel and smell the blood. It's so visceral. Like it's such a great scene. And I think that the storytelling there with the monologue, how he almost teases out what happened, but not fully.
Right.
in the guise of the "I'm dying" monologue.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. It's
Yeah.
really good storytelling.
So since you called this out, so I have it in the visuals, but Andrei Sakula is the cinematographer, and he's also cinematographer for Pulp Fiction. He did not want to shoot that scene that way. This is a Tarantino thing where he said, "You're in the passenger seat, and just drift the camera between them as feels natural to you."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, I'm not. That's not how you shoot a movie." Like he didn't want to shoot it that way.
He doesn't want it to be all like Blair Witch.
Yeah, or like it's very kind of documentary, fly on the wall style. And Tarantino insists, he's like, "No, that's how you're going to do it." And then, like you said, he just sort of naturally follows them, and it makes you feel like you're sitting there in the passenger seat. It puts you in the car.
Yeah.
And you're like, the camera is your eyes, and it follows the conversation naturally. And it just makes it feel even more real.
Yeah, and this is no crazy effects, no trickery. It's just clever.
Yeah, and it's just not. It's something that's done in documentaries and stuff, but it's not something that's done.
Yeah, like if you've ever watched The
movie.
Office, they do this all the time.
That's true. Yeah, The Office has, because they have that pseudo documentary style.
And Trailer Park Boys, same deal.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah,
and the only other thing I had on storytelling was I really liked how they told the story in the nonlinear way, but from aftermath sets. Like I really like the warehouse and all the scenes in the warehouse. I really liked the car. I really liked the diner. Like I feel like you get a ton of mileage out of very few places.
Yeah, and then so the warehouse, it's a mortuary, right? So there's coffins and a hearse in there, which is very good thematically because everyone's going to die. So it's like having a bunch of coffins lined up is excellent foreshadowing. Then for how economical this all is, Tim Roth's apartment is literally like the upstairs office in the mortuary building. So that's not even a different location.
Okay.
So it very much is, they just film in just a small handful of places.
That's perfect.
Tarantino, so initially there was a different director attached to direct this movie, and
he was just the writer.
Yeah, and then Tarantino sold the screenplay to True Romance, and so he had $50,000 in his pocket, and he goes, "I'm going to hold out and direct this movie myself, and if I have to shoot it myself for $50,000, I've got the cash, and I'll just do it super low budget."
Yeah, it'll just be about performances.
Yeah, and so. And kind of everyone that read the script, it was one of these scripts that everyone that read it was like, "Yeah, we should make this movie." Like everyone wanted to make the movie.
Yeah, and he got big names.
Yeah, and so because that got it to Harvey Keitel. But anyways, we're still in the visual section.
Okay, so we're in visuals. I really enjoyed. In the opening scene in the diner, the camera circles the table.
Yeah.
You often don't even get to see the speaker's face. You see an interposed person, and not to like gild the lily or whatnot, but it really reminded me of how it reminded me of the Starry Night painting. There's a piece of brush in the foreground.
Right. That obscures things.
And adds so much interest to the painting. That's what this scene did with the circling camera. You see someone's arm, the back of their head, a shadow. And then it cuts over, and it's almost like you're leaning past a person at a crowded diner table in order to look at who's speaking.
Right. So this is another one. Sakula didn't want to shoot it this way.
Okay, fire Sakula because Tarantino's awesome.
He just doesn't.
He wants to do it like movie style.
He wants to do it movie style. He's a professional, and this guy who's never shot a movie is telling him to do things you don't do. You know, where he's like, just circle around the table, and we'll just shoot it like that. And he's like, that's not how you make movies, kid. I don't know who told you to make movies that way. That's not how you do it. And he's like, that's how we're going to do this one.
Yeah, because I mean, I love it.
Yeah, and so the word I use, everything has this voyeuristic quality.
Yeah.
Where you feel like you're peering in, like you said, you're looking around someone's shoulder. You feel like you're constantly watching things that you're not supposed to be there for.
Yeah.
And then, later when they're in the mortuary and Mr. Pink and Mr. White kind of step off to the bathroom, or I guess maybe like a cafeteria to have a private convo.
Like a break room or something.
Yeah, something like that. And the camera is literally sitting on the floor in the hallway. And a lot of times as they move around, one of them's not in frame at all.
Yeah.
And so again, it just feels like, not like Blair Witchy where the camera shakes all over and you get motion sickness, but it just always feels like you're looking at stuff that you have no business looking at.
Yeah, your eye naturally, you ignore a lot of things in your field of vision. Mm-hmm. Your brain just filters it out. And so by them not pre-filtering it out in the way they shot it, it makes it feel more like you're present in the scene.
Yeah. And so I don't always cite editors because editing is usually invisible, right? Mm-hmm. When it's good. But Sally Menke, who unfortunately she passed away, but she edited most of Tarantino's movies. She came from a background of editing documentaries, and that I think really helps this. Like it gives that cinema verite, fly on the wall feeling to the whole movie. A lot of it comes down to her good editing choices.
Yeah, I think that this movie is really well edited. There's just a couple other visual things that I would pick out. One of them is the intentional choice to have them smoking all the time in the movie. That's one of the things that makes it feel neo-noir to me.
Yeah.
It feels incredibly dated. Like, it does not feel like this movie happened in 1992. It feels like it's set much earlier, like the 70s or something.
Yeah, except for it can't be. It's hard to place when it is. Mm-hmm. But it can't be the 70s, for one, because of...
There's a brick cell phone.
Yeah, and they talk about a big swath of Madonna's career, right? So, it has to at least be the late 80s.
Yeah. But it feels so like these guys themselves are retro.
Yes, they are products of the 70s. Mm-hmm. And that totally makes sense where some of them are older guys. Vic Vega, Mr. Blonde, is a guy that just got out of lockup, so he's going to be a little culturally stunted. So, but it's very strange how it can feel so 90s, but also feel out of time in the way that it does.
Yeah, and I really like that. It feels older than it is, and that's what makes it seem noir.
Yeah.
Kind of like Blade Runner, set in the future, but feels like the past.
Yeah. Retrofuturistic. Yeah, totally. It is. Yeah, that's totally true. And you talk Blade Runner, you got to talk the suits.
That's my last point on this one.
The black suits with skinny ties.
It's so John Wick.
It is very. John Wick does not pull from Tarantino.
Oh yeah,
there's a few. I think there's
ultra violence.
Yeah,
guys in suits, cool sunglasses.
Yeah, and I think also like Tarantino's pulling a lot from John Woo, and so is Stahelski. For sure.
I just said this is a proto-Wickian movie.
In a lot of ways. No, I referenced Wick later. So the Tarantino said everyone looks better in a black suit. There's something about a black suit that he says a man just looks better than he actually is when you put him in a black suit.
I think so. I think we should go and get black suits with white shirts and skinny ties.
Yeah.
And just like wear them to cons and stuff and do our business in those.
It is evergreen. The only thing that changes is how many buttons are on the suit.
Yeah, I'm tall, so it's 2 buttons for me.
I've got, unfortunately, and I'm too fat to wear it now, but I have I've got a 4-button suit. Like I don't know what I was thinking. Like it was very early 2000s, and now it's like I could just, even if I could fit in that jacket, I'd never wear a suit with 4 buttons on it, like Steve Harvey. What am I?
Yeah, that's very Steve Harvey. Anything double-breasted too is
I think double-breasted is back. That's good again.
Maybe I would just go to the suit shop and say, "Give me the John Wick."
The John Wick suit.
That's just
with the Kevlar lining.
Yeah.
My last thing on the visuals was it because I hadn't visited this movie in so long. How many iconic frames there are, like the thing where Steve Buscemi's on the floor and Harvey Keitel is standing over him and they have their guns pointed at each other. That was a poster that was on like every dorm room wall for years. Like there's so many iconic frames in this movie.
I love how it kind of goes over his shoulder to look down at Steve Buscemi for the shot. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, it's just this movie is just filled with iconic images. And that was it. On to audio.
So let's get into audio. So the thing that's weird is that it first of all, it opens with a song. Like, so this movie doesn't seem to have much of a score.
There's no score.
It's just silence and songs. Like, and the first song that opened. The first song you hear during like the credit roll or whatever,
the opening credits,
is so weird and dated. It's just like this
little green bag.
It's like this makes me feel like this is just so out of time.
Yeah. So the whole thing is because it's set during just a single day or like an afternoon while a local radio station is doing a 70s marathon. So it's the K-Billy Super Sounds of the 70s.
I really like that.
Is the soundtrack to the whole movie. And like you said, there's no score. You just have the occasional needle drop. And then when or Stephen Wright as the K-Billy DJ, doing the intros to songs.
Yeah.
And then when the needle drops over, you just have this sort of raw, unfiltered audio that's like, it can be really brutal when it's violent, or like there's also moments of just diner sounds or just neighborhood sounds. And like,
it's interesting how quiet it is. It reminded me of very old movies, like when we watched like the Bela Lugosi Dracula.
Yeah, again, no score.
Just quiet, just silence, and then a guy walks in. You hear the sound of his shoes.
Yeah,
and it's just like it's just extremely jarring, and it made the movie feel old when it was new.
Yeah, and this was, I mean, this soundtrack was not as influential as the Pulp Fiction soundtrack that followed it. But this sort of changed movies, kind of went away from scores and focused more on soundtracks after this. This was really influential.
I mean, this was a pretty decent soundtrack, but I feel like a lot of the times when there were songs, it was almost like it gave those scenes like almost a montage quality.
Yeah.
And so like, rock song with a montage is a standard.
Oh, totally. And it's so many of these songs just were stuck in my head. The Harry Nilsson song "Coconut," that's the closing credits.
Yeah,
that has just been, because that's such a fucking earworm.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And it just like, I've just been kind of going, "Put the lime in the coconut, you drink them both up," and it's just like, that's just been kind of playing in my head for days.
To grim black.
That's how you purged it out. You just
call out to Woe from I think they're from Philadelphia, but they're East Coast American black metal band.
Yeah.
It really will get any earworm out of your
that
head.
Purged all the K-Billy Super Sounds of the 70s. I listened to this soundtrack quite a bit in high school, and so it's all very nostalgic. This Stuck in the Middle with You by Steeler's Wheel, that's
classic.
That is set to Michael Madsen's torture scene. I cannot hear that song without thinking of that scene, and like, you almost like, you just want to kind of you want to do the dance, and like, because he does this whole little dance, and Tarantino describes that, how lots of people would come up to him and talk about this scene and they always would start
dancing.
doing the dance, and they would start out smiling, and then they'd be like, and then why he cuts his ear off, and it's like the most traumatic thing I've ever seen. And Tarantino said he would just always tell people, he's like, fuck you, you enjoyed it. I can tell because you were smiling and dancing when you came over here to tell me about it. And that's the song does so much of the heavy lifting as far as like giving you the conflicting feelings, because he's so cool, and he's doing like a dad dance, almost
very much a dad dance
to that song, and then he's doing just like horrible violence.
Oh yeah.
And so the song is a huge part of why it's so disturbing.
Yeah, because it's just a huge contrast.
Yeah.
So do we want to move on to themes, motifs?
Yeah, because there's a million of them.
Yeah. I mean, I have nonlinear storytelling. That's where I talked about it here, and I really like how that is a theme here. How you're jumping around. It starts you off kind of in the moment, and then you don't need to know about what happened before that, and then you're in another moment, and then you learn, and then anytime something is that you need to know the background, they cut you to that moment and they show you the background, like Mr. Blonde getting out of jail, talking to the boss and his son. That's how you know that he's super loyal. He never betray. He's not the cop. He's not the rat, because he's so loyal. He did his full time, and he never ratted. And so like you don't need to know that about Mr. Blonde in the diner scene. You get it when you need to know it later.
Right.
And it would have been weird if they rolled this up like a Marvel movie where we got like scenes of the background of each person before they ever met.
You know, that's not you're thinking of Suicide Squad. That's how Suicide Squad is cut together, right? Where you meet all of the different Suicide Squad members.
Yeah, and then they come together.
Yeah, and that's not the way the movie was supposed. That's how the studio chopped it up, and it's part of why it doesn't work.
That's just such a... I'm trying to think of the right word. That's a real dumb way to do it. It's a way to make it to where if you are a bonehead that can't follow a moving, a bouncing ball, then you can do it that way to where it's hyper linear.
Yeah, but it's also the most boring way to do it.
Yeah,
because you're like, geez, okay, and now we meet another person.
Who's the next guy?
And now we meet another person, and it is not an interesting way to tell the story.
Yeah, it's cooler when you meet like this cool guy and then later you find out something interesting about them.
Yeah. So just kind of piggybacking off what you're saying, I thought the first theme that I call out is honor among thieves.
Sure.
Because this is all about this alternative society, and that's where it reminded me of John Wick, is that these people exist in their own world that is parallel to our normal straight world.
Kind of Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, and they come over and they have to eat in our world and stuff, but they live in their own universe, and that's really it's really shown strongly in the middle of the torture scene, because Mr. Blonde, he's torturing that cop and he's doing his little dance and everything, and then he walks out to go get a can of gas out of his car, and as he leaves the mortuary, we stop hearing the K-Billy super sounds of the 70s, and we just hear normal neighborhood sounds.
Yeah.
There's kids playing and like a truck backing up and stuff. And he goes into our world for a second and then returns into his heightened reality world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing where you're in this scene of hyperstimulation and then you go out into calm, normal, weird world. It seems weird because you're used to this crazy, fantastical place that you've been. And then he leaves and it's calm, and then you go back to it.
Yeah, and you just wouldn't think anything of seeing this guy. I mean, maybe you'd notice he has a holster on, but probably you would think he was a cop or something, a detective, like, because they wear a shirt and tie with a shoulder holster like that.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think anything of him going out there to get a can of gas. Unless you were really watching it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so, yeah, I thought that was, it's interesting. Then the next scene, or theme, there's this whole sequence in the middle of the movie where Randy Brooks's character Holdaway is kind of teaching Tim Roth's character Freddie about being an undercover cop.
Yeah.
And it's really about acting.
Yes.
And so
I love that theme. That scene, that vibe, that
and so,
story thread. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah. And so a lot of people call this out as a reference to it's a scene from Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 2, and it's called the Speak the Speech, I Pray You, where Hamlet is talking to a group of actors about acting.
We haven't done Shakespeare on this podcast. I feel like we should hit the Bard.
Yeah, I mean, I like Shakespeare. I'm not deep into it, but
Leo and John Leguizamo.
I love Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, that's gonna happen.
Okay, yeah, no,
I like that too.
I love that movie so much.
I saw it in the theater like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
so good.
Do you bite your thumb at me, sir?
Romeo, thou art a villain. Like, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that movie. Okay. Do you have what's your next thing?
Violence. You have to talk about violence. This is a movie all about violence. But one of the things that I think is really interesting, and this was just my observation, so I could be off, but I could also just be a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
But violence never solves any problems. It only makes more.
That's true.
In this movie, every time violence occurs, it doesn't solve anything. It only makes more problems. And so I think that that's super meta. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Tarantino meant that because all of his movies are ultra violent. But I just think that was this movie starts off with a discussion and the guys have this machismo stuff, but they mostly get through all their disagreements with discussion. And so they finish things off with words. But every interaction that goes to violence, it solves nothing.
And you're so like I think our first violent during the heist, Mr. Blonde starts shooting people, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the undercover cops came in, because they were just supposed to be waiting in the wings and let the heist happen.
Yeah.
But because the heist went violent, the cops got involved and more people died.
Yes.
And then because Mr. White and Mr. Pink get into an altercation with each other, they're on the wrong foot when Mr. Blonde gets there. Yes. And that situation doesn't go as they would want it to. And then because Mr. Blonde gets violent with the cop, Mr. Orange is able to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think
just kind of cascades, and it's an interesting observation that violence starts the problems and ends none.
Yeah. Because if no one had ever resorted to violence, they probably all would have survived and got arrested. Like, that's sort of how it would have played out. And everyone would have lived, but the whole crew
might have got away. It seemed like Mr. Pink was pretty slippery.
He is very slippery. He's the closest to getting away. And Buscemi feels like he got away.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I
think he got away.
You think he got away?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of gunfire, but that doesn't, if you don't see a body, he might have got away.
I think he got away. In my head canon,
Mr.
Pink made it.
With the bag of diamonds?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. I prefer that.
He was the consummate professional. Mr. Pink was the
We're supposed to be fucking professionals.
Exactly. He was the only professional crook. The rest of them were just fucking around.
It is really funny how, because he's obviously in the pecking order. He's not the very lowest. Like, Mr. Orange is probably the very lowest guy.
He's a new guy.
But he is the guy that everyone busts on, to the point that he gets the feminine name of Mr. Pink. And so no one takes him seriously, but he is also the most logical one out of anybody through the whole movie.
He's definitely the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, but no one listens to him.
Correct.
So my next theme is family, particularly fathers and sons, but also brothers, and both real family and crime family.
Yeah, it's Vin Diesel.
It's all about
I
family.
don't have friends. I have family.
Yeah, because so you have the real family of Joe and nice guy Eddie, right? They're actually family, and Joe has the surrogate brother in Larry, Mr. White, and Eddie has the surrogate brother in Vic Vega, Mr. Blonde, and then Frank has the surrogate son in Mr. Orange,
yeah.
Freddie. And so everything is about these sort of male familial relationships. Yeah. And that's how everyone...
They have brotherhood. The only one who has no brotherhood is Mr. Pink.
It's and that's why he has some sort of connection, because he does say that he's known Joe since he was a kid.
Yeah.
But he's not... he doesn't have any...
It seems like Joe and Eddie like Mr. Pink, even though he's kind of a...
Yeah, they just bust his balls a bit. Because he's... For whatever reason, they act like he's the dumb one of the group, even though he is the smartest one. It's because he rejects some of the norms, right?
Like when he's given a name, he whines about it.
He complains about the name. He complains about tipping. Yeah, he's a complainer and not a get-along guy. And so they bust his chops.
But, I did like his idea that he should be Mr. Purple. That's a pretty cool name.
He's like, Mr. Pink sounds like Mr. Pussy. And I love the objection. He's like, why can't we pick our own colors? He's like, I've tried that. You end up with 5 guys, and everybody's fighting over who's Mr. Black.
And they don't know each other, so they won't back down. Yeah. Obviously, Mr. Black is the coolest. But if you were going to choose a color, black's off limits. What's your Mr. color?
Oh, it's one in the movie. I just went towards Mr. Orange. That was like my first thought.
Yeah, Netherlands. And all that.
And I'm an autumn, I guess. I like those colors. I could be Mr. Blue though. I feel comfortable in a blue.
Pretty good. I go with Mr. Gray.
Mr. Gray.
I think that's good. Gandalf reference. Old school Gandalf.
Yeah, and then when everyone thinks you died, and you should come back later
Mr. White.
as Mr. White.
Exactly.
That works.
Divers, hit us up on Twitter. What's your Mr. color?
What's your Mr. color? Yeah, or Ms.
Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. I think in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. can be anybody.
It's not gender specific. Do you have another one?
I was just gonna say, basically, I feel like one of the motifs in this is that this movie is a tragedy. Nothing gets accomplished, and pretty much everyone dies badly.
Yeah.
This movie is, it's like The Bard. It is just a tragedy, and it's like you're squealing the brakes the whole way, and you're watching it slow motion crash. And I like that about it. I
really like this Shakespearean take that you have on this. And I kind of I was sort of there in that ballpark too. And I think that is really accurate. Like, it's very, like I said, it seems like a stage play. It seems there, and there is that, the sort of, heightened Shakespearean dialogue.
Yeah.
Kind of, there is a sort of, I don't know, this is not iambic pentameter, but there is a sort of poetic rhythm to Tarantino.
There's definitely a rhythm that goes back and forth to where it has a certain feel to it.
Yeah. And I could see a world where people do these screenplays over and over again, the same way that Shakespeare has handled.
Yeah, I could see this movie on stage easily.
Yeah. My next theme is audience complicity. Okay. And so this is a thing that Tarantino, that he loves to do, but I think it's particularly on display in this movie. You experience the heist entirely in your own mind. You, when Mr. Blonde is cutting the guy's ear off, the camera turns away and doesn't look at it. You
don't see it.
But most people think about the visuals of the guy's ear getting cut off, even though they're not shown. And you create that in your own mind. Like, you create the violence in your mind.
Yeah, that's something that I really appreciated. It's I mean, obviously it's like a horror director thing where you cut away and you see the blood splatter on the wall or whatever. And it's a good way to get the audience to imagine it, because one of the things that I think about when I think about things like from the perspective of an author, I'm not an author, but I think of things like an author would, because I write stories for games and stuff.
And you've studied writing, in in depth.
And so I think that the reader, or in this case the viewer, can think of something worse than you can possibly describe.
Yeah.
Their mind is darker. Their own creation is darker than what you could create for them, because it will be more personalized.
And when you show excessive gore, it gets a cartoonish quality to it.
You lose some sort of credibility in the storytelling.
And if you think about 70s grindhouse horror movies, like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something, anything where people have their guts pulled out or anything like that, you laugh at those moments, right? They don't
that's why my favorite gore movie is Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
That's a good one. Yeah. So if you actually saw him cut a rubber ear off the guy, you'd be laughing, though.
Yeah, it would look cheesy.
Yeah, but by cutting away and not showing it, it's much more horrific than if you showed a fake ear.
Because you just cringe. You're like, oh, God, no.
Yeah. Oh, it's so bad. So when they screened, I think at Sundance, I believe it was Wes Craven and Rick Baker got up and walked out during the scene, and Rick Baker told Tarantino afterwards, that's a compliment. That it was tough to sit through,
too much,
even for those
Wes
horror guys.
Craven and the monster maker himself.
Yeah, they were like, oh, I can't do this. I can't sit through this.
Wow, that's great. That is a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any more themes or motifs.
No, let's get on to the performances.
Okay, so
it's a short cast, so I've got everybody.
I called out my 4 favorite, and I know that's hard to cut anybody. My top of the top is Steve Buscemi.
Oh,
It's
you
Mr.
put him at
Pink.
top.
He's my favorite actor in this movie. He is amazing as Mr. Pink. All of his, I feel like he's in rare form. This might be, I don't know if this is peak Steve Buscemi, because he's pretty amazing in Fargo.
Yeah, and Fargo's just after this too.
This era 90s Buscemi is just so good.
It is.
I really savored his performances.
And so Tarantino wrote that part for himself.
Oh, okay. He want to be the quippy guy that gets shit on?
Yeah. He intended to do that. And then Harvey Keitel, I mentioned earlier, he was instrumental in getting the movie made. He flew Tarantino out to New York. He's like, if we don't do casting in New York, you're really, if you just do Los Angeles, you're only going to get LA people. And you owe it to yourself to go to New York and also look at the actors in New York. And that's where they pick up Steve Buscemi.
Oh, nice.
And Buscemi is great. And Tarantino pulls him aside and he goes, I wrote this part for myself. So if you want it, you have to take it from me.
Nice.
And he did. Buscemi did.
Easily.
He just took the part and made it his, and then you can't imagine anyone else doing it.
Yeah, he's one of the top guys in his generation.
Oh yeah,
he's
for sure.
Super good.
And a good dude. Anytime you see him in anything, he's very humble.
He's funny.
Yeah, and he's he's a former a NY fireman.
Yeah. He volunteered and did fireman stuff at 9/11.
Yeah, went back to his old firehouse and just pitched in. Yeah. And that's real salt of the earth, good dude behavior. We like Steve Buscemi.
Yeah, we're big fans. So how about you? Want to go back and forth?
Sure. My number 1 is Harvey Keitel as Mr. White / Larry. It's a powerhouse performance. He grounds the movie, gives it its emotional core.
Yeah.
And if his performance wasn't so strong, I just don't think the movie would work as well as it does.
Yeah, because he's on my list as well. He feels like he's one of the few people whose altruistic here. Like he really wants to shelter Mr. Orange, like the boy. He looks at him as like the young guy, the new guy. He's he thinks highly of him. He really likes him, and he wants to protect him. He does protect him,
and it's such a tender, like emotional, vulnerable like thing that they have with each other. Like they hold hands when they're in the car, and he's trying to talk him through everything. He's holding his hand and trying to keep him conscious and just keep him positive and everything. And then when they get there, he like to the mortuary, he lays down on the floor and like he's holding him in his arms like a child, and he starts combing his hair, and like it's very like paternal, and you know, and he says this thing like he's like I'm scared, Larry, and he's like, you go ahead and be scared, you've been brave enough for one day. And it's like it's very powerful.
The performance from Harvey Keitel was pretty amazing, and that actually leads me to my second guy, which is Tim Roth.
Yes,
Mr. Orange. The dying in the car scene was amazing. And then when he's dying still in the mortuary, in the warehouse, this long drawn out bleeding death, and he passes out, and then he wakes up and he shoots Mr. Blonde. It's just, and then he, you know, it's like, and the whole time he was the cop.
Yeah.
And he had to learn how to act. He had to do all these things, and he had to infiltrate the gang. And it's just like, I just really love Tim Roth's performance in this movie. It's so good.
It's so good. And like from the moment he passes out, you almost forget about him for a long time, because he's lost a lot of blood.
Yeah, you think he's dead.
He's in like an ocean of blood laying there. And by the time he shoots Mr. Blonde, you've totally forgot that he's even in the room, right?
Yeah, he's basically set dressing at that point.
And that's no easy feat. Just laying there in a pool of fake blood and being totally still.
Yeah, I'm sure it sucked.
Yeah, for probably several days he had to do that. Oh, geez, that's awful.
Yeah, that was a really good performance.
And then we cut back to all his backstory, and we get all of that and his progression as a storyteller that he does.
Yeah, how he's getting better at it, and then he's bullshitting and making up. He's like riffing.
Yeah, and then when he finally delivers his story, the commode anecdote or whatever it's called, and how complete it is, and how he has all these hoods just hanging on his every word, and like he has answers for all their questions, and he's got them entertained and kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? Is he going to get arrested? Like they're on the edge of their seat. And he has all of the details, right? Like of the where he washes his hand. It's the kind of sink where you have to push down the thing, and so you can't really wash your
one hand at a time.
Yeah, and the dog barking at him and everything. Like that whole sequence is just it's so good.
You know what the progression was? He became a dungeon master.
He did. He really did. And you see it. You go from him. He's reading his script.
What is this role playing?
Yeah, he's reading the script, and then he's performing on a literal stage, you know, and it's like, that's all brilliant. Tim Roth he's great in everything, but he's great in this.
Yeah, this is a really good one for you.
Him. My next one obviously is Michael Madsen
he was my last guy.
Mr. Blonde / Vic Vega, Vincent Vega from Pulp Fiction's brother. It's Madsen's most iconic performance of his whole career.
For sure.
And I think performances like this are they're dangerous because he's so cool.
Yeah.
He's so he's sexy, and he's got that sort of Brando, James Dean Smolder thing he does, and everything he does seems cool. Like,
even though he does some shitty things,
he's horrible, but like you do empathize with him, and and he has his own code too. Like everybody's got their own kind of pirate code that they're living by.
He's totally lawful evil.
Yeah,
he's definitely a hard case.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who's kind of intractable.
Yeah.
He knows what he's about, and he's loyal. And
he's completely loyal.
Yeah.
But he is off his chain.
Yeah, he has to have some guiding principles. He has to have a North Star in order to stay functional.
Yeah.
And that's loyalty.
Yeah, and that's kind of the only thing he seems to have.
Yeah.
So, but he's just so great in this movie.
Yeah, he is one of my favorite characters in this movie just because he combines the completely cool with just a total sociopath.
Yeah, and so it's really weird. I mean, I'm saying that too much. It's but I think it's an interesting dichotomy that shows up because the first time we see him in the Madonna conversation, he's like it's about a girl. She's had some bad luck with guys, and then she's met a new guy that gives her a new perspective or something like that. And he has sort of like
kind of a realistic,
like a sensitive thing that's the opposite of Tarantino's big dick theory, right?
I kind of hate Mr. Brown.
Yeah, he's awful. He's awful, and we had a cat fight behind us. If you heard that, divers. Yeah, Mr. Brown's pretty repugnant,
and he has a worse name too.
That's on purpose. It's like Mr. Shit.
Yeah, I would way rather be Mr. Pink than Mr. Brown.
Mr. Pink's got
Although
flavor.
Ironically, brown and pink look good together as colors.
That's true too. Wait, what was our point? Oh, so it's weird. The first time you get introduced to him, he seems like sensitive, and then you have like the scene you see with him and Joe and Eddie, and it's very familial, and he wrestles with Eddie, and kind of like they crack jokes, and like you can see how he's like the second son in this family.
It's almost like him and Eddie are kind of like almost like developmentally delayed. They're not.
They're emotionally stunted.
Yeah, they're
for sure.
stunted because grown men don't show up and start wrestling. That's not a thing. I mean, maybe divers, maybe you do that, but I, as a grown man, have never wrestled with another grown man unless it was like in martial arts training or something.
I don't know. I mean, if someone tried to wrestle me, I don't know. I mean, I guess you wrestle back. You can't, or
you just get thrown on the ground.
Yeah. If you don't also resort to wrestling, you'll definitely get pinned.
I'll power pound him into thumbtacks. ICP style.
Yeah.
Get a chair.
Yeah, you thought this was
we go full mankind.
You thought you were getting into Greco-Roman wrestling, but I do just ECW wrestling.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're definitely stunted guys. Well, since you bring him up, Nice Guy Eddie is the next on my list. Chris Penn. This one I found interesting because it's so much of a better performance than I remembered it as being.
Yeah, I thought this character was lame when I first saw the movie, but now I'm watching and I was like, yeah, that's actually this guy's very believable.
He's very believable. And I think a lot of it comes down to he doesn't wear a cool suit. He wears like an outdated jogging outfit from the 80s.
Yeah.
But he seems like, like when you see real wise guys like this, that's kind of how they dressed back then.
Shitty fashion.
Was in old tracksuits and stuff. Like that was the look. And his weird relationship with Vic and his relationship with his dad, who he calls Daddy, like it's
weird.
It's very, there's something creepy and stunted about it. And then, that ends up being a big deal at the end when they have their Mexican standoff with each other. He's like, don't point that gun at my dad. And he's getting real.
So weird.
He's getting so emotional about it. I think Chris Penn gives a great performance in there.
Yeah, I didn't write him down, but he's not bad.
And you already mentioned Buscemi. So just real quick, the other guys, Lawrence Tierney as Joe Cabot. It's the perfect mob boss, right?
Yeah, he did a really good job. He's very Kingpin-esque.
He does, with the bald head, does make him look like Wilson Fisk, and he's got like the fucking elephant tusks behind him in his office. Like that just makes you look like an awful person. Like, anyone that has a pair of elephant tusks displayed behind him is into nefarious shit.
Yeah, because elephants are intelligent.
Yeah, it's
not cool.
Yeah, well, maybe they're vintage. They're
It's Macedon ivory.
Yeah, maybe.
Died of natural causes.
He has this great, I'm sick of hollering at you guys. You know, like he just has this cool gravelly delivery. Kevin Baltz as Marvin Nash, the cop that gets his ear cut off. I just thought he's, he doesn't have a lot to do in this, but he's a friend of Quentin Tarantino's. And just a funny anecdote is he asked Michael Madsen to drive him around in the trunk of his car for like a half a block, just so that he could get a sense of what it felt like to be in the trunk of a car. And Michael Madsen's like, yeah, sure. And then after half a block, he doesn't stop. He goes down bumpy side roads. He goes and gets Taco Bell, and he drives.
You want this?
Yeah, and he really like tortured the guy for a while, and Madsen said like he came out, he's sweating and had tears in his eyes. Like ended up being a pretty traumatic experience, but it informs his performance.
Yeah,
like,
as a method actor now.
Yeah, and then we talked about Tarantino. Not much to say about him as an actor, but Edward Bunker as Mr. Blue, I thought he dies off screen, but so this guy was an actual convicted felon, and he's an author of numerous crime books, so he just has that authenticity as being a real criminal here in this group of fake criminals.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's it for performances.
It is.
So what do you got for your personal highlight?
To me, the most iconic sequence in the whole movie is the stuck in the middle with you torture sequence. It's the thing that anytime I've thought about this movie in the last 30 years since it came out, that's the scene I think about. So that whole thing, from the moment everyone leaves and like you talk about like people with neurodivergence masking.
Yes.
The mask comes off as soon as everyone leaves. And he goes,
I know a little about that.
He goes, finally alone. and then you're like, and his coolness doesn't leave, but like something changes in his demeanor when there's no more witnesses. And he's like, now it's my time. And, and he says like, it's very dark really quick where he's like, I don't care about anything you have to say. I just find it amusing to torture cops.
Yeah. And
we go into this whole thing and that mix of fun and disturbingness and the way he exits and then comes back into it. And then right up until where he's, when he talks into the ear, and he's gonna, like you said earlier, he's like, are you done? And he's about to light him on fire. And then Mr. Orange shoots him. That whole thing, you're just like, it's edge of your seat. And I think it's dark, but it's the highlight of the movie for me. What about you?
So I hate that I let you go first because that is actually my favorite scene.
Oh,
and my favorite character. So I think you summed it up really well. But there's a few things I wanted to call out as well, just to add on. I didn't want to interrupt you, but we already talked about it before. How the ear cutting happening off screen makes it and suggests it makes it so crazy, and you're just. At that point, after the ear is cut off and he's dancing and kind of shimmying back and forth, and you find yourself kind of shimmying in your chair, and it's fucking horrific. And then when he goes out, you're like, oh, what's he doing? And then he comes back with the gas, and you're like, oh, shit, this is getting dark. Like, as though it wasn't already dark.
Yeah, he's like, as opposed to good.
And then he starts like splashing the gas on him, and I'm like, oh my God, that has to hurt. And it's just like, and then he asks him, does it hurt? You know?
Yeah. And it's like, not to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
The duct tape peels off his face, right? Because as he's throwing the gas, it's like it's a solvent.
Yeah.
And so it makes the duct tape come off his face, and it's like, oh my God.
I just think that the gas being thrown on him after he's already like cut up and whatnot, it's next level terrifying. And then I love how just before he's gonna light him up and just before Mr. Orange guns him down, he quotes the Wicked Witch of the West. How about a little fire, Scarecrow? Boom, 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 boom. And it's just like, oh man, this scene is fucking amazing. That was the best scene in the movie, hands down. Michael Madsen killed it.
What's your runner-up scene?
I think my runner-up scene is probably the diner scene.
Oh, okay.
I love that scene because I love the camera work. I love the monologues for all the different characters, how you get to know them, like Mr. Blonde, Mr. Brown, Mr. Pink, the boss, Mr. White. I just love how you learn who they are by how they interact with other people.
That's the way to do it.
And yeah, it's like that is so show don't tell. Like you learn a lot about Mr. Brown by the way he talks about this song. You just learn that he's just kind of a creepy shitbird.
Right.
And they didn't tell you he's a creepy shitbird. He showed you.
Yeah. And
so I really liked that how that scene set things up. I think it was not to be too cliche, but it's a master class on introducing characters.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so I think that would be my runner-up scene.
Okay. I say, I already talked about it a little bit. My runner-up is when White and Orange first get to the mortuary, and they're just, when he starts combing his hair, that's such a good, like, tender detail and like a loving thing to do to someone. And I was like, God, this is... I don't think watching this as a teenager, I don't think any of the emotion of the movie resonated with me at all. Yeah, because I don't think you don't know anything. Like you don't have the
partially formed human.
Yeah, you just don't have the depth of experience to understand love like that.
It's a really good scene. I liked the white and orange stuff, like in the car, in the mortuary. It's just really good stuff.
All right.
So, what didn't work for you?
Oh, we haven't gone through our what worked.
What worked for me? Oh, okay.
What worked for us?
I mean, for me, I don't really. It's really hard to call out too many things. I feel like the strongest part of this movie is the performances. Yeah. I think that they really got actors that could deliver with just pure acting chops. They don't need things to chew on. They can just give the goods.
And something Tarantino said the first time he got like the cast all together in a room and just sort of watched them interact with each other, and he said, all I have to do is keep the camera in focus. Just these guys are interesting enough that I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest highlights of the movie is the casting. I think that, I call that out over and over again, the choices that Tarantino made with how to shoot the movie unconventionally in a lot of ways made you feel like you're in it. And I think that was extremely important. And I think that probably the last thing I would call out is that notable Tarantino dialogue. It's just so good. That's what you're there for. Just really snappy, clever lines.
These are just bullet points, and it overlaps with yours a lot. The relationship between the characters, the dialogue, the nonlinear storytelling. The only one I think that you didn't mention is but you sort of did with the show don't tell. There's a sense of lived in reality in this world.
Yeah, like it's kind of gritty.
They feel like fully realized characters where you could go anytime in the last 20 years and they were doing there's a whole story for each one of these guys.
Yeah, like you can imagine Mr. Pink mansplaining to his sister how to set up her TV and VCR, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Like everyone feels like real people, like not from our world necessarily, but like fully realized people in their world.
Yeah.
Yeah. What didn't work for you?
I didn't really like the music in the movie.
Wow.
It's just
That's going to be a controversial
It's
take.
just kind of like, I don't really like how it was used. I didn't really like what was chosen, with the exception of the torture scene. That song was perfect. None of the other songs.
You don't like Little Green Bag as they walk in slow motion out of the diner in their suits?
It just didn't really do anything for me. And the thing is, as I say this, I was really combing for something that didn't work for me.
Okay.
It wasn't like it just stuck out and I was like, oh, fuck that. No, it was just, what did I like the least? And it's probably those songs are not, I don't really, I would have rather have had like a Cure song or something I like. I just didn't really like that music.
Okay.
It's no Crow soundtrack. It's no Spawn soundtrack.
Yeah. Wow. It's no spot.
That's a good soundtrack.
I want to crap
I'll
on
fight
that
for that.
But there's
some stinkers, but
there's some good
ones.
songs, and it's got unusual collaborations like Marilyn Manson and the Sneaker Pimps. That's a weird collaboration. That's
and like
cool.
the one with Jonathan Davis and who did he do that with?
It's all where they pair a rock musician and an electronic musician with each other.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
yeah, that's
so
a good
I call it
soundtrack.
a minor complaint. And it was mostly I didn't like how it was placed or the song selection. So it wasn't a huge thing. It was just the only thing.
Okay. For me, it's...
racism.
There we go. Yeah.
I don't like racism, but we already talked about it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it again because, and I'll probably, for every Tarantino movie, I'll have to keep talking about this.
Okay.
His fixation on racial slurs, racist dialogue, and the N-word in particular.
And we're watching Jackie Brown.
Yeah. At least Jackie Brown has a black person in it.
Okay.
Yeah, or two, actually. But everyone talks about Tarantino's foot fetish. I think his real fetish is the N-word because that is in every movie.
Yeah.
They don't all have ladies' feet in them, but they do all.
Was there ladies' feet in this movie?
No, there's not. There's
barely a lady. There's a waitress. There's a lady that gets shot.
There is two ladies that get carjacked, and we never even see the waitress.
Oh, that's true.
There's a female detective in a deleted scene, and that's it. There's no women in this movie. So no one to show their feet. But we still have the gratuitous N-word stuff. And honestly, I was real close to docking a star from the movie because of it. Mm-hmm. Not to skip ahead to our rating, which is coming up. Ultimately, at least on this first movie, I'm going to be more forgiving about it.
Okay. So, I mean, now we are at our final thoughts and rating. So what did you give it?
It is a 5-star movie. I don't know if it is truly the greatest independent film of all time. Anytime you say something is the very greatest, that feels hyperbolic, but it is certainly one of the most influential films ever. It changed cinema going forward. It's just one of those big leap forwards.
Yeah, I was really debating between 4 and 5 because there are a few things wrong with this movie, and I like to think that, and that's casual racism, anti-Semitism, the lack of women in the movie completely, the fact that it does not have a complex plot, but it's not about a plot; it's a tragedy. That's I kind of came around on that one when I realized this is actually just a tragedy, and you don't need it's about the interactions between the characters. It's not about the things that happen to them. And so I come around on that, and it's hard to give a movie a 5 if it has some glaring weaknesses like that, like a lack of women and casual racism.
Yeah, but those are not craft related things, right? You know,
they're
what I mean?
writing related though. Those were choices.
Okay.
And so man, it's a 4.5 movie. It's a real tweener. And I do think though, this this movie is utterly iconic and it's classic and it's a cult classic. Everybody loves it. And I think its impact is so much greater than its flaws. I sided toward 5, not 4.
Okay.
So I went with a 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're of one mind on that. Like it's squeaked out a 5 from us.
Yeah, IMDb gave it a 8.3, so that's closer to a 4, and it's got a 90% Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
Which is certified fresh, but there are always haters, especially on 30-year-old movies. They'll take a modern take on it and drop a deuce.
I think as Tarantino has stopped being a fresh voice and has become more like an institutional voice, people have less give him less rope.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
They don't like his old stuff as much because they don't like his new stuff.
Yeah, I think that happens.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll get back to our final segment.
Welcome back, divers. It's time for our final segment, the one where Ask Dave, what are you into right now?
So I had a real hard time with this one because I haven't been doing shit since we last recorded because I went on vacation.
Yeah, I mean, that
could
be the
counts.
thing.
That's what I'm into right now. So that's all I got. I went to London, England, and it was pretty crazy. You can't really do the whole, an ancient city, 2,000-year-old city in a week.
No. London's a megalopolis.
Yeah, it's
a massive
I mean,
city.
The only cities that I can compare it to is Tokyo.
Yeah.
And I love Tokyo as well, and I love London. And I found their transit there is fucking superb. It reminded me very much of Tokyo. In that it was extremely efficient. It was very easy to navigate, super simple. It was clean. It's not like gnarly or grimy or anything like you'd see like in American transit or whatever. It's just it's really good. I really liked it. I saw the British Museum, which was it's kind of their repository of looted artifacts from the world. And it's like this
accurate,
beautiful ancient building, or it looks ancient. It's marble columns and everything. And I just saw all these things for my reenactment stuff. I went and I spent like an hour and a half in their migration period room, which is like commonly called the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And I just
that's going out of vogue, though. We're not supposed to call it that anymore.
It's just, if you're not a history person, you would call it the Dark Ages, but a history person call it migration period. And that's what I personally do my recreations for. So me and Carrie took pictures of literally every exhibit in that room.
Yeah, I have not been able to sift through all your pictures. It's a lot, but
it's and the thing is I own reproductions of like a lot of that stuff, and it's like really cool. I love it. I feel like a personal connection to those things. And then we bopped around the rest of the museum. You can't do the whole thing in one day, but we did. We had to skip a lot. You can't do it all like.
Not in depth.
We spent a lot of time in the Central and South America room and looked at all of the Aztec, Mayan, Olmec, Mexica stuff. It's just really cool. They want it all back, but Britain has said no. There's an Easter Island statue. They want it back. They won't give it back.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I saw one of those. It's pretty rad. I mean, they should give it back, though. It's a religious symbol.
Oof, yeah.
And it was literally looted because the British sailors thought it was cool. And as they were loading it onto their ship, the natives were weeping and imploring them not to take their gods. Oof, yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of gray moral implications for going and seeing this stuff, but it's a free museum. You don't pay, so it's not like they profited off of my, me seeing it. I do support them giving things back.
Yeah, repatriation of artifacts.
Seeing that stuff and then spreading the word that this exists and these things are being held is is maybe some sort of payback for seeing stolen goods. But anyway, that place was really rad. The Tower of London, which has the White Tower and it has the crown jewels, that's all British stuff. They own all that. It's from their history. And so it's pretty cool. The crown jewels, we see the Indian diamond.
I was like, where the diamonds come from?
There's a huge Indian diamond, and they say, like, oh, yeah, it comes from when we were owned in England. I was watching some videos on this stuff, and it's hilarious. Their mind process. They're like, listen, if we had governmental jurisdiction over a place at a time, anything we took during that time belonged to us. Therefore, we own it. And so that's why they say they own all that shit. They're like, we owned that place. We took it when we owned it. Therefore, it's ours.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like a weird kind of logic. It's like, I was squatting in your house, so when I stole your shit, it was mine. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, there are so many cool things in London. We went to the Camden Town, which is like punk rock, goth mecca. Like we went to clubs and bars and all these cool punk rock stores and looking at all this neat stuff. We didn't buy a ton of stuff because, we didn't have a bunch of bags. And ultimately, a lot of the things, aside from the handcrafted things, you can just simply buy online. But it's cooler just to go and experience it all.
Yeah, just get the flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, 8 tons of food. British people know how to make fish and chips. Who knew? Also, Indian food there, kick ass. It was just a really great vacation. I'm going to go back to England. I probably won't spend a whole another week in London. It's very crowded.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch your daily updates on social media and I was like, when is this going to start bothering Dave? Like I was just sort of waiting. And then by the end of the week, you were like, I'm kind of done with the press of people and everything. And I was like, there we go. That's the Dave I know.
I miss my cats and I miss having no one near me. Like I can go out my back door and I can throw a rock as far as I can throw it and it will hit nothing but forest.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
Totally. I was like, he doesn't like standing in line. This is all line stuff.
But they do lines really well. They're like Japanese people with their queuing. They're just so good at it.
They're efficient. Yeah.
I went to the most insane store you could ever imagine. It's called Harrods. It's world famous.
Ancient department store.
Yeah, and it's like 6 or 8 floors. I don't know, 6 floors, but then there's basement floors too. And they have everything. Like they have a deli, they have a grocery department, they have like 6 restaurants, they have clothes, they have electronics, like the highest end of electronics you could think of. Like we were walking through and I was looking at those are some cool boots. Those are like rad. I could wear those out of here.
$700?
No, like $1,200.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just insanity. And just when we were walking through the men's clothes area, like I went over and I looked at some trunks, like Under Armour brands shorts. And I was like, how much are these? Because I know I could get Under Armour gym shorts online for like $30.
Probably, yeah.
90 pounds.
Okay,
so
but
like
with the exchange,
$110, something like that.
Is the exchange rates that direction right now?
Oh yeah, for sure. Pound is worth more than $1.
Oh, when did that happen? Because it was the other way, not that
very
long.
shortly after Brexit, and then it flipped right back up.
Okay.
Honestly, Brexit economically, it was a shitty thing to do, but they recovered fast. It did not devastate like the doomsayers said.
Okay.
Anyway, I could sit here and talk about all the crap that I did, but it was a great experience. Anybody who hasn't been there, it's one of one. It's it's Londinium from ancient Rome.
There's nothing like it.
It's very special.
Yeah, no, I've never been, and that was it looked like a really
you'll
great
like
trip.
it because you like Tokyo, you'll like London.
Excellent. And I fully speak the language as opposed to like toddler level Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone understands you, and even the tourists that go there speak English. Yeah, so you're good.
Excellent.
What about you? What are you into right now?
All right, so I've been on this kick of these like music biographies, right? And I'm just continuing on with that. But this one, I'm going to give a bit more of a qualified recommendation for.
Ooh.
And so this is, it's called The Evolution of a Cro-Magnon by John Joseph. John Joseph was the vocalist of the band The Cro-Mags.
Oh.
And so this is their text, their copy is in his new autobiography, New York hardcore legend John Bloodcott Joseph recounts his hard times and spiritual redemption. A traumatic childhood in foster homes was just the beginning of John's evolution before fronting one of the most important bands in the underground punk scene. John faced homelessness, addiction, betrayal, and insanity. Still, even his success couldn't save him from a relapse that set him back to square one, rock bottom. And they bill it as an unapologetic autobiography about his life. So it is pretty unapologetic, and that's why I'm giving it a qualified recommendation. There is a lot of tough content in this book. He's fairly unrepentant about crime and violence and stuff that was done in it. And he kind of he talks a lot about his spirituality, and sort of being an evolved individual, but there's this undercurrent of homophobia that permeates the whole thing.
Weird.
And so I just feel like you're not as evolved as you are portraying yourself as, bro. But the book itself is riveting, and his upbringing is truly harrowing. It's one of the worst childhoods I've ever heard about. Like the sort of abuse he suffered is exceptionally bad in a world where bad things have happened to a lot of kids. And I was, and it has moments of humor and it does have sort of a redemption arc to it, but there is this sort of revelry in the thuggishness of his life that makes you go like, I don't know how much I fully support this, even though I was engrossed in it and entertained by it and enlightened by it in some way. Like I learned a lot about his life and about that time period. But I just don't think he's as evolved as he would like you to think he is. So with that understanding that there's going to be some disturbing content and some not politically correct dialogue choices, and in the audiobook, he does some offensive accents. And with that, if you can get around all of that and you're interested in the hardcore scene and punk rock and the Hare Krishna cult and any of this stuff, it's a very fascinating book. But it's got some rough spots.
It's a little less than socially acceptable.
Yes, that's it's very not politically correct and often ignorant, but still interesting and still a very compelling narrative. Yeah, he's a good writer. I just think he doesn't quite have it. He buys his own bullshit a little bit too much.
Yeah, I've read both books by David Goggins, who is, similar thing, really hard upbringing, et cetera, and he's a compelling author. But some of his hot takes or whatever, or his stances, controversial stances, I just don't agree with.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay to not fully buy into everything but still support or like something. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not like you're supporting Burzum or something where the guy's just rotten to the core like a Nazi.
Well, and I'll just use an example of something that's very deeply problematic. He goes into a long anecdote about a friend of his that is trans, or it's someone that passed away. And he sort of misgenders her and dead names her half the time, but still is it's like you can see this sort of effort of trying that's going on.
Yeah,
because he's also using her chosen name and celebrating her life and everything. And it's just like, I feel like in the editing you could have flipped all the he's you left in there to she's and just and fully made good on it. But there's he just can't quite let go of the homophobia and the transphobia. And I think that comes from the Hare Krishna religious thing.
Is he still from that religion?
He's not involved in the organization and the cult anymore, but he still believes in the spirituality of essentially Hinduism.
Okay.
And it's a very patriarchal, homophobic, like so many fundamental religions are. So he's sort of, and he's also into Rastafarianism, and that's also very patriarchal and homophobic. And
most religions are mind poison.
Most religions, go back to the foundational documents, have that homophobia and patriarchal thing in them.
Yeah.
And so he just is clinging to it in a way that I think if he was truly an evolved Cro-Magnon, he would have let go of those parts of it. Anyways, I still like the book.
What's the name of the book?
The Evolution of a Cro-Magnon.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm going to give you the call to action.
All right.
Subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher, as well as YouTube, Spotify, and Audible. Don't forget to leave us a review, thumbs up, ring the bell, leave a comment, the whole deal. Yeah. 5-star review costs you nothing, but means everything to us.
You can find us on all social media platforms across the metaverse is at Deep Dive the Meta, and I'm doing this out of order. New episodes of Nick and Dave Deep Dive the Metaverse drop the 1st and 15th of every month. We are on Twitter, which Dave likes. We're on Instagram, which I like, and we are on Pinterest, which no one likes.
Well, I guess this is really goodbye.
Don't say goodbye. Say good journey.